Everybody, welcome to the show. Bob Gower. He is the COO of Traver Companies. Bob has been in the automotive business for 44 years. He's a friend of the show. He's been on the WTF podcast. Bob is a wealth of experience and a plethora of knowledge. What I'd like to do today, Bob, is delve into that wealth of knowledge that you have, that you hold in your repertoire. And I'd like to dig in and see how we can take an in-depth problem that you've had, uncover how you went about solving it, and see how we can apply those skills to the problems, big or small, that we all face on a regular basis today. So, Bob, I'd like you to think back in your memory and what comes to mind as a significant problem that you faced, and provide us with a little bit of context, a little bit of backstory.
Sure, I'd be glad to. One of the biggest challenges I think any business faces, regardless of the industry they're in, is how do you replicate yourself?
Mm-hmm.
We always talk about it. Sometimes we're successful, but sometimes I think we stop a little short of achieving that goal. So I would say the biggest problem we have today, and I used to say this, I've been doing this for a little bit of time, and when I worked with dealers, when I was on the consulting side, their biggest problem wasn't expenses. It wasn't profitability. Their biggest problem was reinvesting the money they made into another facility without hurting the facility they already had that was successful. So, you just can't take your best people out of one building, put them in another building and hope it works. So I think we all face the problem of how do we duplicate successful people, and so that we can continue to grow and expand?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that one, Bob. We all have our prize team members that do great, and we often have a joke of it at FixedOPS marketing is how can we get another Russell to
Right.
to do the same thing, and it's so difficult. So
That's
tell us.
impossible, by the way.
Yes, it's
He's too
certainly.
he's too unique, but there certainly is an alternative to him that you
Yeah.
really should be seeking out. Who's that, like, co-host, that they could play off each other really well and then duplicate himself so he doesn't have to do it all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. So tell me how you have approached solving that problem yourself.
Okay, so in a little backstory, I think that's what you're looking for.
Yes, please.
A little backstory is I ran a Toyota store. When I started in the automotive industry, I worked for the Rourke Automotive Group, and I worked for a gentleman by the name of Jim Rourke, who is a legend and an icon in that business. He was second generation. And when I started with him, I started in sales at the Toyota store. I worked my way up to be the general manager through multiple roles at the dealership, and went to work for his son, David Rourke, who is a personal friend of mine still today even. And when I was in the role of general manager, I ran into John Traver, which I've worked
Mm-hmm.
for today, right? So when I ran into John, I used his sales BDC services for about 3 years in the store. And there became a point in time where, you just feel like, and I know you probably have never felt this, but you feel like you're in a lid and you just can't grow any further in the role that you're in or the environment that you're in. It's just a natural thing for people that are inquisitive and that are learners. You kind of hit the lid and then you want to know what's over the lid, what's more.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
when I met John, I was really intrigued by his ability to communicate. That was his real key to success.
Yeah.
And I was so intrigued by it that I wanted to go to work for him. And you got to remember, I spent 16 years in that Toyota store. So, literally, I handed everybody's paycheck out on Friday,
Mm-hmm.
and thanked them for a good job. Everybody, including the lube techs and the lot attendants, right? And the dealer. It was kind of funny. But the reason I did that was so that I knew everybody on more of a personal level. And I got to see the actual turnover that we had. So if I had a new name that I didn't know who they were, I knew that we either were growing or we had replaced somebody else, right? So there's a methodology behind why I do things. But I really was intrigued with what John was doing to take an industry that was kind of, which was the second problem in business, is waiting for customers to walk in the door, not doing anything other than marketing spend to drive it.
Yeah.
And he had a unique concept with the BDC to do that. And so after I became a customer, I really wanted to raise my lid and I wanted to go to work for him. But here's the problem. The dealer loved me. He loved the idea that I could get an opportunity to go grow somewhere else. He was okay with that. What he was not okay with was me walking away and leaving a gap in the business. So we had some really long conversations about that, right? If I left, it would put him in a really tough situation. How I was able to move was because of my position at the dealership. He literally gave me an opportunity to find John Traver. Actually, he encouraged me to go seek John out to be a vendor partner for us. So that dilemma caused a problem where I had to go replace myself. He said, when you replace yourself, then you can leave. Very, very smart, right? And I thought it would be pretty easy. It's like, okay, in a month, I'll be done with this project, right?
Yeah.
So I found the best person to replace me in the market. I chased them down. I got them to come on board. They were really well known in the marketplace. But going from a GSM slot to a GM slot, it's a little different, you know. So in order to get them up to the speed that they needed to get up to, it literally took me a year or so to do that, much longer than I thought.
Yeah.
And I did not have a process for it. That's why I thought I could do it quickly, right? So the processes that I put in place is what I think every business owner needs to start doing if they want to replicate themselves, grow their team, and be able to expand, even like what you want to do in your business. So as I look at that, what plan do you need to put in place to make that happen? And I give you some clues, some hints that help me along that path. First, you got to find the right person. And that may not be as easy as it sounds, right? So they got to have the key word here, just so you know, is competency.
Yeah.
They have to have enough experience in the same type of business vertical that you have so that they literally can problem solve, understand with a depth of knowledge what needs to be done. And then the rest of it is much easier. But if you find someone that's really great at service and you want to put them in that GM role and they've never run sales, that could be a struggle. Not that it can't happen, but it's going to take you longer, right? So if you're looking for a GSM to put in that role that doesn't have any background in service, you have the same problem. So what you're really looking for is finding that right person that has the right competency, I would say is key. The second thing you want to look for, they have to fit into the team. So you guys have, you've seen businesses disrupted by somebody coming in at the top and making major changes and not being able to align with the team. And it causes you to lose the team you've assembled, right? So integrating that person in the business is key. So the first thing I would look for is who in the business that you don't have to make that adjustment with. It's already is part of the core fabric of the culture, who is promotable from within. So we always like to promote from within. Okay. Now, so let's take it to the next step. So just day-to-day activity is not going to get you there. So what I learned was part of the problem solving is sitting in meetings that I would run that I was changed the role from leader to observer to coach. That's very difficult. The more successful you are, the more engaged you want to be. It's really hard to be the backseat driver, you know. That's a true statement. I can't stress it enough.
Absolutely.
It took me 6 months to figure that piece out, where I needed to be hands off. The plane won't crash. Everybody can make either strides or they could go backwards a little bit, but the risk was mitigated. So I really shouldn't have had any fears of letting that happen. But it took a while. And I would say at the 6-month mark, I finally got it. And it dawned on me in a forecast meeting where we would go around the room and each department would forecast. And then the dealer would look at me and say, what do you think about the forecast? And then I would go around the room and say, well, that's a little optimistic. That's a little, you're sandbagging me a little bit here. And that's really not a great plan to get us there. That's an awesome plan. So I had to take that. And instead of driving that, I had to sit back and listen to how they would forecast without me. I got really good at forecasting because I had to be in that role. So
Yeah.
letting that other leader take that role and then not critiquing them, but coaching them. So I'm on the coach side of that meter. So you got to be really careful. Most people that I meet are on the critique side of the meter.
Yeah.
And what happens when you critique is it causes you to defend, complain. It just doesn't, it's not a good situation because what you want is the opposite of that. You want resolution, right? For your
Right.
problem. So you have to be really careful. If you start critiquing, you won't get to resolution fast enough. So you really have to seek out when you have those problems is what's the resolution? It's not the who, the why, the what. It really is moving forward. What do we change differently to solve the problem? And I think that's hard for us to focus on.
Yeah, and it sounds like, you came up with this procedure, or at least these checked boxes of the person that you needed to replace you. Now, did you develop that as you went through this time frame of 6 months to a year, or did you kind of figure it out step by step?
Unfortunately, Charity, I'm a learner, right? I had no teacher. So So to me, it's then trial and error, right? It takes longer, goes further, and you wish that you had some of the answers to the quiz before you got started. But there are some times that in your life or in your career, you don't. And, we're talking in the late 80s, 1989. I went to work for Traver in 1995. So I was the GM in that store between 89 and 95, even though I worked in it since 1980. So the key there is back in those days, people didn't have mentors. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, especially in that competitive of an environment, right? The other day, I was on a call, actually on Wednesday nights with 56 business owners that do a 1 hour session. And it's so confidential that you have to sign an NDA to get in. But it is so, the content's so pure.
Mhm.
And it's so open and it's such a trusting environment that you're not afraid to ask a question and they're not afraid to give you answers. And that's relatively new. That really wasn't around, and especially in our business, because our business is so highly competitive. And you got to remember, um, it's a little different today than it was back in those 80s and 90s, even though you weren't born yet. We worked 15 hours a day because if we didn't, we thought somebody just might take our job. There was a lot of pressure on bell to bell and knowing everything.
Mhm. Now, do you think that, this kind of, I mean, it's a huge problem finding someone to replace you. Do you think it's different the way it would be approached by someone my age today as opposed to when you did it back in when you were GM?
Well, I think first of all, you have access to better communication tools than we did. You have LinkedIn today to go
Hmm.
look for that person, right? Which we didn't have back then. I think you have a wider network today. You have a wider trusted network today. But I would utilize all those skills to find the right person. Um, I think that the advantage you have may also be a disadvantage as well, because when you're looking through that, you can get what I would call distracted because there are so many people available in the marketplace. Trying to find the person that is the right person, you might have to go through, I don't know, when we do an Indeed ad, just as an example, um, there's a couple hundred applicants by lunchtime. And the problem with that is just trying to sort through them all, right? And I heard somebody say the other day, wouldn't it be great if we had an AI tool that could sort through 200 resumes and give us the top three? And
Yeah.
it may be out there. I just don't know where it's
Yeah.
at,
They do.
right?
They do have them. They search, I think, mostly by keyword or skills. And
Yeah. So if you
yeah.
look at that today, those are the assets that you have today that I didn't have back then.
Let me guess. At this very moment, another vendor is walking up to your lot with something shiny to sell. Before you head back and hide in your office, let me take a minute to tell you about my friend Dawn Pelham and my friends over at Global Dealer Solutions. They exist to help you find solutions to problems, some of which you might not even know you have. Best of all, they can manage as many products and services as needed for you, helping cut down on multiple vendor visits and distractions. And if you need anything, you have one number to call or text for the response all dealers like to hear. On it, GDS understands that successful dealerships require more than a set it and forget it mentality. And they'll be with you every step of the way, from setup, implementation, training, and support. And if necessary, they'll even cancel non-performing products for you. No pushback, no arguments, just a solutioneer executing course corrections as needed. Check out gdsdealers.com to learn the difference and set up a time to meet. Let's see if they're a good fit for you.
The second part, though, the challenge we still have today is most of us are remote.
Yeah.
So it's a little harder to bring somebody up to speed fast enough being remote most of the day, because that it's really hard for them to connect with you often enough and to see some of the things you're doing in real time live that maybe you're doing virtually with a customer or virtually with an employee that they can't see. So I
Yeah.
think there is a little bit of a disadvantage there based on the fact, how are you going to get that person up to speed if they're not even in your office? Now, John Traver is a big believer, as most people, that we should be in the office, and I'm a big believer to find talent, the best talent. Sometimes you're going to find it out of the office.
Mm-hmm.
But so you see that, for example, if you were to replace yourself today, how would you do that? How would you bring somebody up to speed with what you do? And then it's fractional, right? You can't spend 8 hours with them today. It's going to be a 2-hour conversation, a webinar, maybe a meeting invite. So I think that's your biggest challenge in today's market. So you really have to be a little bit more organized, a little bit more disciplined. And I think you have to find different modalities to be able to connect so that you really do understand, do I have the right person?
Yeah. I think competency is a huge part of that when you're looking for, just like you originally said, right? And trust. And they really have to be able to self-manage in a home environment with all of its distractions and kids and dogs. And I've even had people with birds in the background.
I know, and that's typical today, because even if you call Dish or DirecTV, I mean, you'll hear a parrot in the background, and I'm like, well, I know for sure they're not in Dallas, Texas, that's for sure. But as you know, I think that that's a really strong element of this is, what's the training program look like? What's the 30, 60, 90 day process look like? I've been fortunate my whole life, every milestone. I think I said this on your last podcast. I've had a mentor. Literally, I can tell you every change in my life. When I made that change, I had a mentor. So I think we kind of need to make sure that whoever we're bringing on board, even if it's us, not just us mentoring them, that you handpick some people to mentor them as well. So I think that's key, right? Because people have different perspectives. And if they're going to take your role, and your role is to work with multiple leaders in your organization, they really need to have somebody that can walk them through what those verticals look like, what the key players are. And, at one point in my life, I worked for a Fortune 300 company, and we did an exercise that I thought was just, excellent. And we would do meetings on a regular basis to identify high performers and and we would put them in, for lack of a better word, a grid or boxes, so we could see how they were progressing through their span of time with us because we already had identified them as high performers for whatever reason. One of their managers identified them. And I have to tell you that in an organization as a Fortune 300 company, I was allowed to cross over verticals to go get a high performer. And, I worked for a really smart man who said to me, Bob, at the end of the day, we understand together that you're going to hit your number because you know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
What we really expect from you is that you turn the people that work for you into high performers that we can put in other parts of our business to be successful. So we were measured more by how many people could we promote than me actually overachieving my number, which sounds a little silly, but they expected me to hit that number anyways. And in a dealership environment, it's still the same. You're expected to hit your numbers in every department. But what you're not expected sometimes, it's not on our list, is how many people internally have you promoted?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense though. I mean, that that basically measures your ability to pass on your knowledge to other people.
That's right.
So,
So it starts with hiring,
yeah,
recruiting, sourcing. Then it goes to the next step, which is training properly. So I used to say that Tom Peters, I believe, had the saying that you need to get the right people on the right seat of the bus, right? And with my teams, I like to take it a little further. I like to have the right people in the right seats on the bus, and I like to get the bus out of the parking lot.
yeah. So that makes me wonder, when you're going through the process of looking to replace yourself, now, did you sort of come up with this process all on your own, or did you gather input from other people? What was your methodology through that?
So that first round that I did that in my first role as a leader, leaving that spot was pretty ad hoc, just so you know. So I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mhm.
I thought it would be simple to find a GM to plug my into my store and just walk away. And I could have done that, but the dealer principal, who's a friend of mine today, wouldn't have worked well for him, right? That'll still left some gaps, some uncertainty. So I think that my first round with that was ad hoc. My second round with it in a Fortune 300 company was more prescriptive, like high performers. Where are they at? Who has them available? What roles do we have open? How do I replace leaders I have today with other leaders? And then how do we grow the business to create other opportunities? So you've got to be able to continue to grow so you have other opportunities, or the people that work for you that want those opportunities will have to find them somewhere else if they're not available in your organization.
Yeah. And it sounds like your methodology is very, I mean, you have clear points of which, you need to check boxes off to make sure these people are the leaders that you're looking for. Now, would you say it would work for the personality type that more um, kind of flies by the seat of their pants and kind of just wings it and hopes for the best? I mean, is there any hope in that?
Well, I think that's people that are creative and their personality type is outgoing, right? Uh, but when you look at people, there's two or three or four aspects of a person today. If you look at the type of testing that's out there available, right? So personality testing's been around for a long time. But I think that that falls short. That's kind of like a view, but it's not the view. The view is there's an emotional, IQ that's available, so we could see how you communicate. That Liddell Lynn and people like that, Liddell Lynn, specializes in that. And then you go to you got DISC for personality profile, Briggs and Stratton. There's all kind of testing out there. I find a couple unique ones that are really eye-opening though, that we kind of stop short. We think we get it because I know you're a I type, deep type personality. Would you be a good fit? Probably. Communication wise, with emotional IQ, you can see what kind of communicator you are, which is really important, by the way.
Yeah.
And then the third one, which very few people ever have even used, is change style index. And what that tells me is if we all had the same personality profile and we put ourselves in a horseshoe, who's the most originative and who's the most pragmatic? And I got to tell you that in some of the businesses I've run, me and a I would call him co-manager, co-leader, we both had a share of the business. We were on the left-hand side of the horseshoe, which means we were very quick to change. What was interesting is most of the people around us had the same personality profile. And they had the same emotional quotient as we do, emotional IQ. When we did the change style index, I was amazed. Almost our whole team was at the bottom or on the far right side. So we could move faster than they could move. I'm like, we were already doing 4 or 5 things. They were back to the first thing. Then we couldn't figure out why we weren't getting anything done, right? So it's, I'm telling you, the more I learn about people, the more interesting I am in how to take a look at a person and not stereotype them. That's so old school. It's to see where are the opportunities, and then how do you have the opportunity to communicate with them properly and understand how they do things so that you can work to that level rather than anticipate everybody's not the same, right?
Right.
And
No,
I've had
that's
some, yeah, I've had some great opportunities in Dallas. I had a chance to go to the First Baptist Church there and do an executive coaching workshop to be certified for executive coaching. They had it at the church because the church actually uses executive coaching. And if you think about it, that's brilliant, you
it
know.
is.
But there are certain things they teach you in executive coaching on how to coach executive CEOs that, are specific. There are 5 or 6 different things you should look for, and some of it is, intuitive, but it's not taught in industry today. So you really got to seek out some of those areas. If you really want to replace yourself, you have to understand what that process really looks like. And I think it's more than check the box because to me, it doesn't matter what the personality type is. So, owners today are strong, dominant personality types, or they're very compliant, what I would call detailed, task driven, or some of them have a personality that drives the business, right? So,
Yes.
all 3 of them are successful, by the way. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't say one's more successful than the other. What makes them successful is the team they build around them. That's what makes you successful. So you should always be, if you're going to replace yourself. I love when somebody takes my job. I've had people take my job from me in the past. And most people would go be afraid of that. I think if you're going to replace yourself, you need to embrace that. You need to hope somebody is going to take your job. I always laugh because my title's COO. I'd love for somebody to steal that title from me because I'm going to be CRO. I want to be CSO. I mean, I want to do something else. I'm ready. I'm ready to take my title, right? And you should always look at it that way because all you're doing is strengthening the business and the people around you. And, the first dealer I worked for, which was second generation, he said, you don't have to be the best. Surround yourself with the best. So if you have that premise in your whole career, you're always confident enough that nobody's going to take your job. You're just going to have you find another open position that you need to create or take over to move for them. And I love that. If you
Yeah.
if you have that concept, then somebody should take your job and you should be happy. I'm always sad when nobody can take my job and I feel like I'm stuck here in purgatory for a while, you know, right? And
Yep.
I have a high ID personality type, you know. So I'm not always the check the box kind of guy, but my drive, there's other things that get me where I'm going. My personality, my drive, my ability to influence. I just have to surround myself with other team members to pick up some of the detail of that,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
drive some of the things on their own. So I think that that's the cool part about business. It's a work in progress. It's really a journey. I don't think there's a destination.
Yeah.
I think you're only limited by how far you can go by the kind of people you surround yourself with. And if you're looking over your shoulder and there's nobody trying to take your spot, you haven't done a great job.
Yeah, that's very well said, Bob. And I'll throw one more question at you.
Sure.
Um, so, are there specific qualities that you look for when you're looking to find a problem solver? Like someone that's really good at finding solutions to problems. Are there specific personality traits that we can look for?
Well, I think the first word is the word competency again, because without that, you can't understand the problem to solve it, right? I think you need somebody that can not be opinionated about how to solve the problem. I think there's multiple ways to solve problems. I think to find a really great problem solver, their problem isn't telling you what the solution is, it's telling you the right solution based on your culture, your environment, because they have so many solutions that might work. They're trying to now determine which is the best solution. Those are the kind of people you want to surround yourself with to do problem solving. First, they have to be confident enough to understand it extremely well. The second piece is I would look for people that aren't opinionated, that have a solution, because a solution never fits in every situation. It doesn't fit in every environment, doesn't fit in every business culture. So you got to be able to take that and adapt it to fit in the culture so it is non-disruptive, but fixes the problem to resolution.
Yeah. Well, Bob, that gave us a great point to start. Anybody who's looking to replace themselves or surround themselves with a great team or grow their business. I mean, there's so many good points that you touched on today. I appreciate you sharing them with us.
Well, as always, I appreciate being on your show. You're awesome.
Thanks.